Oh,
HR headlines. Let's go. You
what
pumped?
an intro. I can't believe Adam's missing this.
It's all right. He's jamming with his sloth off grid. Well, we got some big news as always. Danielle, I'm curious on this one. Have you heard the term new collar worker? What is this new collar worker about?
Yeah, so I hadn't heard of it until I came across this article. But essentially, it is describing something I've spoken about actually on the news before, about how people are just graduating into the workforce from out of high school and just landing these crazy, high paying jobs at big companies. And it's really fulfilling a need for these organizations, like skill wise.
Yeah, it's huge, right? And I think look, I've been a big proponent of this. I'm not a huge fan of. I'm a fan of education. I'm not a fan of college, right? And I think it costs a ton of money. It puts students in debt. It's just getting more and more and more. And now we're seeing companies. I know IBM is probably the most notable company that
Yeah.
has just they dropped the degree requirements. But we're seeing this trend all the time. And really, the only sort of thing that I could see, like if you graduated like 5 years ago and you're like 100K in debt, and then you see like all these jobs with no degree requirements, you probably, it probably sucks for
You're probably
those people.
pissed.
But I think for everybody else, I'm like, again, like I'm not a huge fan of this quote necessarily, but the whole hire for attitude, train for skill type thing. But
Mm,
um, I do think like there is just this in our society there can be just this weird weight on these degrees, and what they're saying is that, I mean, you get a degree, it really doesn't show that you can do a job at all better than someone who doesn't have a
yeah.
degree. um, but I've run into it before. In fact, one of my earlier jobs, they actually wanted my transcript, like my whole college transcript, to get a job.
Wow.
It was as a bank manager, believe it or not. So if you run into that, like if you ever run into a company where they're like, we need to see your GPA and everything you did.
That's so strange.
Have you ever run into that?
No, I've never run into that, but I have run into like, I mean, when I was applying to internships in college, they would ask me like, what are your most interesting classes that you're taking? Which I actually really liked that as a question, because no one else cared to ask me that, besides my parents.
You're like, my degree matters. This is amazing.
This matters. I'm taking industrial psychology. It matters so much, but what else I have to say about this is a lot of people are opting out of the college system. And I think especially this generation that sort of is seeing that there's a system at play
That's right.
that is not going to work for them, and it hasn't been working for a lot of people for years. And I think that's like kind of the result of this trend that we're seeing, this new collar worker. And with the average of the American workforce gonna it's about to shrink, right? Companies have to do what they can to really ensure that they have a workforce to choose from in 20, 30 years. So one of the best ways, obviously, is lowering the barrier to entry. And realistically, like you said, I like education as well. I don't think that college is the only way to be educated, and I think especially with how fast things are moving and innovation is happening, that other alternatives to college, like boot camps, YouTube, online courses, like
Yeah.
masterclass, right? Like all these things are a place where you can actually get knowledge that will help you, increase your skills and be I guess, a more suitable candidate for a lot of the roles that we don't even know what they are right now.
100%. I mean, look, I get what's one of the most common questions I get on my TikTok live shows where we're just running for like job seekers. People are always asking about certifications, degrees, this, that. And to your point, I think technology moves so fast. I think about my degree that I got, I don't know, back in 2011. I don't think any of it is really relevant. It did help a little bit when I started in recruitment, just to have a baseline knowledge of different
Yeah.
positions, and I could kind of recruit on different roles. Um, but at the end of the day, skills. I think the one thing I think everybody should learn how to do in general, and I don't think our education system necessarily does a good job of this, is just problem solving. Like just being a problem solver, taking initiative, seeing a problem, taking that initiative and taking the action.
Yeah. I would also argue communication.
Communicate. Yeah, well, texting and is that what
Yeah, but also, like, conflict resolution, which kind of overlaps with problem solving.
yeah, yeah.
I think that's a huge miss that colleges and universities, like, should be teaching, but they're not. But I do think that one of the bigger problems at play too here is that the hiring system is broken. Like, most jobs are filled, correct me if I'm wrong, through word of mouth.
Oh, man, we're getting in the hidden job market here. Look, I think jobs are filled lots of different ways at the end of the day. Like, I would if a company puts up a job ad and they get qualified people through, they're gonna look at those qualified people. If they go through employee referrals, they'll look at that too. I think jobs are filled
Yeah,
in lots of different ways. I think I think you got to apply to jobs nowadays. You've got to network. You got to meet people. You got to go above and beyond. And to your point, I do think these companies lifting off that degree requirement, it opens it up because sometimes it's just
totally.
silly. Like I talk to people who have like 25 years experience. They're killing it. They're doing amazing things. And then they won't get an interview because they don't have a degree. That's just stupid. Like it makes no sense. So I think it's like, what's your degree? Great. You're interested in that. Amazing. But if it's gonna like stop people who actually have great skills and experience being able to work at a company, that to me is where you start to lose it. So, well, let me know from you guys. What do you guys think in the comments? Degree, no degree. You like
Yeah.
this? You think this is a good thing, bad
What did you
thing?
study? Are you doing the thing that you studied? Like, I'm so curious because I feel like a lot of the stats out there say that most people who graduate with a college degree don't end up actually using it.
I would 100% agree with that. And
Yeah.
in recruitment, well, I'd say there's 3 fields where, like, I could see that not applying, like, healthcare is one of them, construction, I see a lot of people get, like, a
Yeah.
construction degree and go into construction, and then engineering, that I think those are kind of, like, the 3 in my mind that stick out, but it's like, if you got a general business degree, who knows what you're gonna do? What was
100.
it? What was your degree in?
Mine is actually kind of relevant.
So you
I was
you just
very
proved your
intentional. I was
point
like,
wrong.
if because I was very lucky to have my parents pay for my education, so I was like, if this is what I'm able to do, then I need to study the thing that I'm actually going to end up doing. So I thought really critically, and I probably bored my mom at length with conversations about what I was going to study, and I ended up studying psychology, and minoring in media, entrepreneurship, and economics. So feel like that was helpful because of what I do now with like human dynamics and multi-generational workplace, kind of consulting stuff and speaking definitely helped me with that.
Well,
With
that's
that degree.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, I got my degree in finance, and I do not work. Well, I did work in banking for a while, but I am out of it. Now I'm a recruiter, which requires 0 degree, which is probably not a good thing. Um, so someone else said, so I take it Heather said, how to communicate effectively with C-suite VPs would be beneficial in a variety of industries. Huge, right?
Yeah.
Those are the types of skill, the real world skills I like
Yeah.
to call them. Well, why
But
don't we move on to the next segment
yeah,
here?
let's do it.
Um, what do we have here?
All right. So essentially, I mean, I see one of these articles every few months, but basically it's now about Gen Z sharing or oversharing on LinkedIn. And, I think that this is funny because Gen Z is very blunt and to the point in a lot of the social media that we post and take control of certain accounts. Like I have seen the most random accounts like Chili's like popping off because there's a Gen Zer behind that social media account.
Duolingo? I just think of Duolingo.
Duolingo, yeah, it's a great one. I was just reading about Chili's, how it's like the next best one. But yeah, so essentially this article is talking about how a Gen Xer is trying to get her engagement numbers up and they're like falling, and she consulted a social media expert, and the social media expert, who was probably a Gen Zer, said post more personal stuff to increase your visibility, and she felt like that felt inauthentic.
Yeah.
And like that's fine. I think we just grow up in we grew up in different times, in different generations, right? And I grew up with an online world. since I was 15. I've been, on social media, and I find that I feel more authentic if I'm sharing certain things versus holding other things back. And so I'm kind of having an opposite problem where like I'm trying not to overshare. But I'm curious like how like what your relationship is with this too, Joel.
Look, for me, for a long time, like the personal posts would actually get better engagement than the rest of my content, which I think
Yeah.
is the norm. But now it doesn't happen. Like I shared a picture or a photo of my daughter on last Friday, and I was basically saying like how some online guru was like, "I don't spend any time with my family because I'm building a business," and he's like glorifying that. I'm just like, this is so stupid. Like nothing makes me happier than spending time with my little girl. Okay,
Yeah.
and no amount of work is gonna ever be more important than that. And I think that post, it got like 200 likes, 250 likes, which for some people it's like, oh wow, that's a lot. But if I share like a recruiting meme, it gets like 5,000 likes. So I've like I used to share more personal stuff,
Yeah.
and my whole mentality was like, it's nice for people to get to know you and that type of stuff. Um, but now I'm just like, to me, there's just no rules, and I'm like, I think you got to know your audience. Like, I think there are some audiences that appreciate personal and vulnerability, and there's other audiences that don't.
Yeah.
Um, and I somebody made a great point. They were like, no one's gonna like negatively say something about like if you post about your family or you post something personal, like no one's gonna really say it to your face, but maybe they make a judgment behind your back. But again, it's just people have been talking about this a long time. I think where to that person's point about not being authentic, that's what it is for me. It's like if you're just sharing something for the
For the sake
likes
of
and the
sharing.
vanity
Yeah.
metrics, I'm like, that to me is where that's not even authentic. It's
Yeah.
like it seems kind of weird. But there is that tendency to do that. I think when you see personal posts do better than
Right,
everything else.
right. But your point about, like, why your posts didn't do well is probably because people are used to seeing memes and, like, laughing from your
Yeah.
content. So then when they see that, it's like, "Oh, that's nice," but, like, get
Yeah,
back to
it's
your own
my
content,
my
buddy.
recruitment content's way more impressive than my
Yeah.
actual life, so thank you.
Good. I think stick with that, even though your daughter's really cute.
She
Yeah,
is a
no.
cutie. Well,
But
yeah, go ahead.
there are certain, like, examples of oversharing. What's the worst one that you've seen on or, like, a bad one that you've seen?
I mean, for me, it always boils down to that crying CEO. I think that was just the cringiest, worst thing, and, like,
That was a
look,
big one for
I
you.
commented on that post super early as well, and I think I was like, "Oh, wow, I feel so bad for you," like, and they kinda made fun of the post. It was this whole thing, but, that one really, really sticks out to me, and then I've seen people post about everything from, like, sex habits they've got to, like, weird
Oh my god.
fetishes, and I'm like, "Okay, come on, it's LinkedIn, alright? Like, what?" But, again, there's no rules, so do you, that's what I say.
Yeah.
That's my
I
new thing, you do
I
you on
saw one
LinkedIn.
on LinkedIn Lunatics that which, by the way, is a Reddit page for anyone who doesn't know. Reddit is a website, but basically people post,
Reddit is a
uh
website, guys.
that is a website. It's not Web3, it's not Web1, it's Web2. Anyway, yeah, so they posted something about seeing like a poll about is it okay for same-sex coworkers to share a bed on business trips? And I think that's just like so cringe.
Wow.
Like, don't talk about that publicly.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
that when polls were big, you would see some I've seen some really weird
like some
polls.
strange ones.
What's your
But
take on it then? Are you like, share personal if you're authentic? Like, where do you land on this?
yeah, I think like share, but don't overshare. And if it feels like you're oversharing, you're oversharing.